The final shot of Christopher Nolan's Inception has inspired more know-it-allism than any other film image. Is Cobb still dreaming or not? Well, clearly he's back in reality. The top wobbles a bit. He finally sees his kids' faces. We actually see him arrive to this location, unlike other dream settings where he just appears. He's not wearing his wedding ring, which never appears on his finger in the real world. And Michael Caine confirmed that Nolan told him any scenes that he's in are reality. And yet, Cobb's son, played by Christopher Nolan's real-life son, Magnus, tells his father, "We're building a house on the cliff, just like Saito's house." Of course, Nolan wants us to debate this because the real answer is that Cobb does not care if the top stops spinning or not. Dream or awake, he has chosen a reality where he is with his kids. And that choice in the face of uncertainty is all that matters. But what is the real reason Nolan leaves us with this anxiety? If his team of dream thieves is a metaphor for a filmmaking team trying to incept a director to return to his kids, who does Mal represent? I'm Erik Voss, and this is The Deep Dive. Forgive me, but I couldn't wait to start diving into Christopher Nolan's Inception because the questions posed by this final shot frame our entire understanding of this film. Upon rewatching Inception, new details I never realized before completely recontextualize it. I, along with many, have posed before that Inception is not really a movie about dreams, it's a movie about what Christopher Nolan dreams about, and that is the anxiety of filmmaking. This entire movie is an allegory for making a film. In this team, Cobb is a director who looks and dresses just like Christopher Nolan does. Arthur is the producer, Ariadne is the screenwriter, Eames is the actor, Saito the studio, Yusuf the VFX artist, Fisher the audience. But Mal is the one part of this equation that sticks out. She doesn't represent Christopher Nolan's wife, Emma Thomas. Emma Thomas is his trusted producing partner, his Arthur. Mal represents a force that is far, far more important to every filmmaker and to Christopher Nolan especially. And in this analysis, I think I finally revealed Mal for what she really is to the filmmaker. The composer, Hans Zimmer, actually opens this film by blowing our goddamn eardrums. Syncope is Christopher Nolan and Emma Thomas's production company, and its logo is a maze. An important image to this film is a symbol of the unconscious and the physical architecture of the dreams they navigate. Hans Zimmer's opening notes, "Bon bon," are actually a super slowed down version of the tempo of Edith Piaf's "Non je ne regrette rien," bum 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 bum, which of course is used in the plot of this movie to synchronize from one dream layer down to a time dilated one. But there's even more to this than I realized, because Zimmer confirmed that the opening note is the same note as the note that we hear in the film's final seconds. Zimmer's goal was to connect the ending to the beginning like a Mobius strip, a dream looping back on itself, in which we go from the closing scene in which Cobb's son shows him his house on a cliff, looping back to Cobb washing up on the shore looking up at a house on a cliff. Zimmer said that not only these notes, but the entire film score is subdivisions and multiplications of the tempo of the Edith Piaf track. Piaf's song, its title translating to "No, I Regret Nothing," is about letting go of the past, freeing oneself from painful memories, which this entire film is for the character of Cobb, to save him from becoming an old man filled with regret. Before Marion Cotillard played Mal in this movie, she won an Oscar for playing Edith Piaf in La Vie en Rose, which just contributes to this whole movie feeling like a real-life dream. Playing these notes over the opening titles makes us feel like we are awakening from the dream of our lives into this film. Piaf's song is 2 minutes and 28 seconds long, and Inception the movie is exactly 2 hours and 28 minutes long, to the second. So really, the voice of Mal is behind all of this. Nolan wants us to liken this experience of watching all parts of this movie with the experience of having a dream. There's actually neurological evidence that brain activity when you're watching a movie is similar to the process your brain goes through while you sleep. The visual cortex is highly active, and the prefrontal cortex, which deals with self-awareness and logic, is dormant. So like all of Nolan's movies, especially Tenet, this isn't a movie that you should think your way through, you should just feel it.
Don't try to understand it, feel it.
Film editor Walter Murch, who worked on the Godfather films, Apocalypse Now, and actually directed the movie Return to Oz before never again returning to directing, wrote in the best book about film editing, The Blink of an Eye, that we love films because they remind us of dreams. He wrote, "We accept the cut because it resembles the way images are juxtaposed in our dreams. In the darkness of the theater, we say to ourselves, in effect, this looks like reality, but it cannot be reality because it is so visually discontinuous. Therefore, it must be a dream. And so we cut from black to the opening crashing waves of a shoreline with no context of why Cobb was in that water. And again, one of the few times we actually follow him as he arrives at a location is when he returns home with his kids. But the first thing Cobb sees is the backs of those kids as they play, but right as his son starts to turn, Cobb's gaze drifts back into the puddle. He's afraid to look at their faces for fear that he will get trapped in a wrong reality. Now, Cobb's name is a nod to the thief in Nolan's first film, Following, and to architect Henry N. Cobb, making this Cobb an architect who builds dreams to steal. Cobb is dragged in front of an elderly Saito who asks,
"Are you here to kill me?"
Cobb is there to shoot him and then himself to free them both, and Saito recognizes Cobb's spinning top as his totem, but in match-cutting shots, Nolan frames Cobb's wedding ring, which many believe was Cobb's true totem before he adopted Maul's totem of the top. Throughout this movie, Cobb only wears the ring in his dreams, perhaps to keep Maul from attacking him. When he's awake, his finger is bare, and that includes the final scene. So when in this movie Cobb spins the top, he's looking down at the top and at his left hand where the ring finger would appear or not appear. He is testing both totems at the same time. Saito begins to remember Cobb as a man possessed of radical notions, and we cut from Cobb eating to Saito, now a younger man, taking the bite. It's a seamless cut in the same location, the way dreams will just suddenly transition from moment to moment. Cobb says,
"I need to know my way around your thoughts better than your wife, better than your therapist, better than anyone."
Better than your wife. Cobb knows the power of one's wife knowing the shortcuts around one's mind. Nolan transitions from the lower dream level to the higher one, the rioting city, by showing the close-up of Cobb's watch ticking faster, because we are in a dream within a dream, 2 layers deep, where time is dilated between these layers, and this opening section teases the multi-layered plot structure and really just teaches us how to watch this movie. Since this film uses dreams as metaphors for filmmaking, it helps to depict these layers as film strip sequences, each film strip cut by an architect, a dreamer, who conceives of the scenario and the structure of the dream within the mind of the mark, who populates that architecture with their subconscious projections. In this case, the architect is Nash, who designed Saito's dining room to look like the Nijo Castle in Kyoto, Japan. Surrounding the table is the willow chair designed by Charles Rene McIntosh and the barrel chair design of Frank Lloyd Wright. It's really a mishmash of architecture because Nash just kind of threw it all in. Guy's sloppy. Maul interrupts this dream.
If I jumped, would I survive?
Yes, her opening line, a taunt reminding Cobb of her suicide. We cut mid-conversation from outside to inside, where Maul observes this painting, which is a real work by Francis Bacon called Study for Head of George Dyer. Nolan loves Francis Bacon, and he uses his painting style as inspiration for the Joker's look in The Dark Knight. George Dyer was Bacon's lover, and Bacon painted him with a hole in his head in this painting after his death from an overdose in order to remember him, reflecting the way Cobb uses his art as a way to memorialize his late lover. But the Maul who Cobb remembers and runs into throughout these dreams is not his wife. It's something darker using the skin of Maul to seduce Cobb. A siren song composing the music drawing the sailor to shore. She asks,
Did the children miss me?
I can't imagine.
Yeah, Cobb literally can't imagine what his kids are really thinking or what they even look like. Now, as Cobb shoots the guards, he holds his hand over the release to try to catch the shells. I used to think he was trying to do this to keep them from making noise as they would hit the floor, but the sound of a shot is just as loud as that. So really, I think he was trying to leave no bullet casing behind, but ultimately though, if you look really closely, he misses the first casing. So really, I just think Cobb is trying to be stealthy, but the guy is totally losing his edge. As Cobb turns the dial on the safe, the last number on the combination is 53. 2053 is a recurring number throughout this movie. It's also on the taxi that they use in the first dream level. 20 is also the first number on the combination of Maul's safe and Limbo, so presumably the combination on both safes was 2053. That number reversed is 3502, which is on the train that crashes through the dream in downtown LA. 3502 was the number on the hotel suite across from where Maul died, so Cobb reversed Maul's perception of reality by tampering with her totem, so she reversed his meaningful number into something really twisted. It's his own guilt torturing him for learning Maul's save combination. Remember, Cobb tried to use Maul as an anchor in his repelling line, telling her to stay put, but she got up to leave. And I always wondered, why would he trust her at that moment? But I just realized now, it was a test to see if she would betray him to Saito. That's how he knows later to have a fake doubled envelope with blank pages, not ones that he left in the safe, but one in his hand for Saito to take. He successfully used Maul in this charade. And the proof of this, when Saito sees these blank pages, you can see Maul smiling. Maul loves that Cobb uses her in this toxic way because it's one way that she can ensure he will keep visiting her in these dream heists. tracks. By duping Saito, she has lured Cobb into one final really deep dive. So when Cobb gets the kick, the bathwater floods Saito's compound and a look of fear washes over Cobb's face. Even though he was put to sleep in front of a tub and he knows this would happen, I think it's because crashing waves represent a unique subconscious terror for Cobb. And I don't really know how Cobb does this, but he leaps from a wet tub onto Saito to wrestle Nash free. I can't even stand up slowly in a tub without slipping. This guy is an experienced extractor who has fought through all kinds of conditions. Now the kid on the train starts Edith Piaf's countdown.
Leave me and go.
You don't seem to understand, Mr. Saito.
Saito turns, hearing that slowed down Edith Piaf outside, but Cobb leans in to turn his attention back to him. He throws Saito to the floor, accidentally alerting Saito to the false nature of the carpet.
I've always hated this carpet. It's stained and frayed in such distinctive ways.
Yeah, this is Saito's love nest, where he hooks up with his mistress all the time. If he spent so much time on the floor, knowing where it's stained, yeah, what do you think those stains are? The timer runs out and Arthur wakes up. Yeah, they timed it so that they would wake up precisely on Edith Piaf singing the word "ni la bien," literally on the word good, meaning it's a good thing to wake up and one shouldn't get addicted to living in dreams. Cobb says,
I'm getting off at Kyoto. Why, he's not gonna check every compartment. I don't like trains.
He says, I don't like trains. It was a train that Cobb used to kill himself and Maul to wake them up out of their forever dream. But getting off at Kyoto, it was a Kyoto castle that inspired Saito's compound, and that is where Cobb will later finally deboard the dream train with Saito. Cobb tests reality by spinning the top, ready to shoot himself if it doesn't topple, but when it does, notice how DiCaprio closes his eyes in relief, but then does this thing where he shakes something out of his mind? It's a subtle gesture showing how this is the totem he used to accidentally incept the idea in Maul's mind that ended up killing her. Saito asks them about Inception, which Arthur says is impossible, but Cobb knows it is because, yeah, he did it to Maul. Saito asks,
Do you want to take a leap of faith? Or become an old man filled with regret?
These men will later exchange these same words in limbo to remember their arrangement.
To take a leap of faith, yes.
But these words in this moment trigger Cobb because Maul said these same words right before she jumped.
I'm asking you to take a leap of faith.
Cobb connects with his old architecture professor, Miles, Maul's father, who says,
Come back to reality, Tom.
Now, you could totally interpret this whole movie as an actual heist on Cobb, that his legal troubles might not really exist. He might just be refusing to face his kids over the guilt over Maul. I don't know though, since they would have had to convince two industry heads to join in on this supposed intervention. Reality before LA would have to be a dream for that to be true, so I'm not really sure, but at least this is definitely an internal journey for Cobb. Ariadne is named after the figure from Greek mythology who helps Theseus navigate the labyrinth, and Cobb tests her by having her draw a maze in 2 minutes that would take longer than a minute to solve, which she does by drawing a circular maze on the back of the graph paper pad. But what I only now noticed, this maze is actually not solvable. Try it. Start from the center, and right away you see that both paths are blocked off. Is it a production mistake, or is Cobb actually impressed with an architect who can design a complex maze that would leave the center, in this case Cobb's dark history with Maul, inaccessible? The circular drawing sets up Cobb drawing a circle to represent a sleep cycle.
We create and perceive our world simultaneously.
This section of the movie is very much like Morpheus explaining the Matrix to Neo, and he uses the same reveal as the agent training program.
Where are you right now?
We're dreaming?
And as the dream collapses, the city block explodes piece by piece, suggesting the power of Ariadne's mind and her attention to detail. Director of photography Wally Feister shot this practically with actual exploding debris, using 6 high-speed cameras to capture it 1,000 frames per second. Later, Cobb describes Ariadne's natural grasp of it like someone getting addicted to a drug.
She'll be back. Reality's not gonna be enough for her now.
Indeed, these dreamers reclining with needles and tubes in their arms does very much look like addicts shooting up. Arthur explains,
That's why the military developed dream sharing. It was a training program for soldiers to shoot and stab and strangle each other.
yeah, we forget that this totally takes place in a sci-fi world where dream sharing was invented by the military to make soldiers into heartless killing machines, but instead these architects use it to better understand human psychology and emotions. One of the craziest visuals of the film is Ariadne folding Paris back on itself, which looks so good, largely for the way they disperse the shifting shadows across the buildings. Without these, this would probably look a lot more CGI, but the lighting makes it feel like it's happening in a real world under our same sun. As they walk through this, we see how Ariadne created a new practical 3D architecture. Cars driving down vertically pass into a tunnel that looks like a curved balcony on this side of the street. Like at first glance, one would think this could logically make sense, much like when we first look at MC Escher's art. If you look at it too long, it starts to break your brain. scene. As they approach the Seine, Ariadne actually uses MC Escher's dress to effect a mirror within a mirror into infinity to create this real-life bridge, the Pont de Berakim. I'm sorry if I mispronounced it. But interestingly, before she folds the mirror wall, see the bike path on the ground just suddenly ends at the railing? So Ariadne is really using the broken ends from her past bent city maneuver to create a new path, which is based on a real place. And Cobb warns her about using real-world places like this.
Building a dream from your memory is the easiest way to lose your grasp on what's real and what is a dream.
Filmmakers will take little details and influences from their personal lives, but to restage one's biography as they're living through it is a very difficult task. And it's one way for a filmmaker to really lose themselves in their work. This whole glass wall shattering upon Ariadne touching it was actually one of many images and themes that parallel Satoshi Kon's anime Paprika. I highly recommend you watch that because you'll see a lot of similarities between that and Inception. Coming up for air from the dream here to thank PayPal Honey for sponsoring this video. Honey is the #1 online shopping tool, but calling it an online shopping tool doesn't really do it justice. Using Honey's like having a little dude following you around while you shop online whose whole job is to help you save money on stuff you're already buying. Honey automatically searches for promo codes so you don't have to. It works for lots of your favorite websites, whether you're looking for clothes, food, video games. Really, if you could be spending less on something, Honey helps you spend less on it. It's ridiculously easy to use, which I really like because I like things that are easy to use. It's also free, which I really like because I also like things that are free. When there's a coupon, Honey finds 18% worth of discounts on average, which is probably why it's got over 100,000 5-star reviews on Google. But hang on, in your rush to get Honey, don't just go to joinhoney.com, go to joinhoney.com/deep dive, because that is how you're gonna help support this channel. You also can just click the link in the description box below. Arthur explains the concept of a totem, showing his loaded die, which always lands on the number 5. Arthur is the 5th member of the team in terms of how deep they go, like Yusuf being the outermost dreamer at number 6, Arthur being number 5. When Arthur fights projections in the hotel, he does so on the 5th floor, and as his floor rolls, he keeps his center of gravity like the loaded die, always landing in the same place. Every totem represents its character in some way, like in the case of Eames, it's a poker chip, which he is initially seen flipping around his fingers. Cobb says Eames' spelling hasn't gotten better, and it's because on that chip he spelled Mombasa with 2 S's. It's an intentional flaw. He also bets on number 13 because he just loves the chaos. Like an actor consulting on any project, Eames breaks down how best to emotionally manipulate someone.
You need the simplest version of the idea in order for it to grow naturally in your subject's mind. The relationship with the father.
I love Tom Hardy's wince on the relationship with the father because he knows how cliche it is, but it always works. Like, daddy issues is often what any movie boils down to. Nolan's own work in Interstellar and Batman Begins, and yeah, this movie, and pretty much everything Steven Spielberg has made. But Eames might also wince because he knows Cobb is in the middle of his own parental drama, and Eames might have daddy issues of his own that we don't know about. Now, the Mombasa chase in this movie absolutely feels like a heightened reality. Like, we know Cobalt Engineering is pissed at Cobb for failing to deliver the dirt on Saito, but also doesn't this just feel like artificial drama to keep a rat running through a maze? Like, Nolan's overhead shot of Mombasa's grid actually looks like a maze, and the alley walls surreally close in on Cobb like he is in a dream. The chase ends with Saito rolling up perfectly timed to open the door on an assassin? It makes no sense. Cobalt in general is one loose thread that doesn't make sense in this movie. Like, at the end of the movie when Cobb returns to LA, wouldn't Cobalt still be hunting him down? So if you want to say reality in this movie is a dream, I don't blame you. Arthur teaches Ariadne about paradoxical architecture.
That lets you create closed loops, like the Penrose steps, the infinite staircase. Paradox.
Yeah, I love this shot and it totally looks cool, but what really just happened there? Well, the woman who dropped the papers, who they passed twice, is actually the doppelganger Black Cat from the Matrix, the glitch in this Matrix. But this time they passed the glitch instead of the glitch passing them. Arthur is showing how a dreamer can create architecture that follows logical order from one perspective, and then in an instant, you can shift it so that it abides by a completely different logic. Arthur pays this off later in the movie.
Paradox.
Arthur reveals that Maul is dead.
What you see in there is just his projection of her.
What was she like in real life?
She was lovely.
But Arthur reminds us that the real Maul, a woman we never really meet, was actually wonderful. But this Maul is a powerful evil force that's just using her face. Eames infiltrates the Fisher business to learn how to mimic Browning. Eames notices the pinwheel photo that Robert placed beside his father's bedside. In that photo, it's actually Cillian Murphy doubling for a younger Maurice Fisher, the father, wearing glasses and a mustache, making this a perfect symbol for Robert Fisher, his fear of his inability to become his own father. This moment with Browning that Eames glimpses is actually the only scene with the real Browning in the film. It's from these crucial few seconds seconds that Eames is able to perform his entire caricature of Browning upon. As they brainstorm, there's a close-up of a newspaper article with bizarre spacing in the second margin, with fathers taking up an entire line and success misspelled, and it totally would have fit on the previous line. Yeah, daddy issues literally leaping off the page here. And on another page, in the top left, a previous article ended with the quote, "before speeding off into the night," which I'm pretty sure is the final line of exposition in Nolan's previous screenplay, The Dark Knight. The six of them brainstorm in this downtown LA city block, and then on the steps of the hotel, showing how they actually gave themselves more time to brainstorm in the time dilation of these dream layers, as Ariadne finished building them and they were all able to test them out. We basically see the empty movie sets before the filmmakers populate them with extras. Ariadne sneaks into Cobb's dream session, taking an elevator down through his memories, Mal's childhood bedroom, and the dollhouse where the safe is actually hidden. The second memory shows Cobb visiting Mal, maybe to appease her on the eve of this big heist to beg her to stay out of it.
You said you had a dream. We grow old together. And we can.
As we hear the final notes of the film from the composer, Mal delivers this film's biggest jump scare with just a glance. Then they visit this beach memory.
Why do you do this to yourself?
It's the only way I can still dream.
I just noticed that behind Cobb in the background is someone swimming. Could this be Cobb himself from this memory, out wading through the waves instead of being with his kids? Ariana takes the elevator lower, passing a roaring train, this being the memory of when Cobb and Mal killed themselves to return to reality. Really, Ariadne's presence in these memories enrages Mal. She's jealous that Cobb is now working with a younger screenwriter instead of her. It's possible that Cobb could have kept Mal satiated in this memory tower had Ariadne not gone poking around, stirring the cage so that Mal would be restless right before the heist. On the airplane, Eames pickpockets Fisher's passport so Cobb can hand it back to him and subconsciously get Fisher to order a drink.
Water, please.
Same.
And he starts this whole manipulation process with,
Well, he was a very inspiring figure. I'm sorry for your loss.
an inspiring figure, as he will be in these dream layers. So before we take the plunge, we start here in the film strip of reality on the plane, a reality that is also part of the simulated heist because Saito bought the freaking airline. So in a way, this isn't even real. We cut directly from this into dream layer number 1, Yusuf's dream, which is drenched in rain because Yusuf forgot to pee before going to sleep. Already things are going wrong. And it looks surreal because it almost never rains like this in downtown Los Angeles. Again, it's an in medias res jump cut to a dreamer right in the middle of their dream, reminding us of Nolan's first shot of the Joker in The Dark Knight. We get a second jump scare in the form of Mal again. Yes, 3502, Mal's reverse number, on that train as it plows through. Again, this is the train that they used to kill themselves to wake up. And Nolan actually brought in a massive practical train through downtown LA to shoot this. As a student of Steven Spielberg, Nolan knows how elemental a crashing train is. It was a single image from The Greatest Show on Earth that traumatized a young Steven Spielberg and inspired him to capture his horrors on film to move past them. Meanwhile, the taxi is number 2053, and its license plate and the plates of all the cars here read the alternate state. This loud machine gun shootout in the streets of downtown LA is Nolan paying homage to Michael Mann's Heat. Each dream layer is really Nolan recreating one of his favorite films. Eames transforms into Browning using this awesome vanity mirror. With each successive shot, we see Browning reflected in some mirror surfaces. In the closer surface, you can see Eames has given Browning a bruise, and then when he turns away, he's fully transformed into Browning into our reality, but in the mirror, we see the back of Eames' head. I just gotta credit Tom Berenger as Browning in these scenes because he has to also play Eames impersonating him and still showing Eames taking mental notes of everything Fisher is giving him.
He could barely speak, and I could only make out one word: disappointed.
Like an actor improvising on a set, Eames has to work with what his scene partner is giving him. Cobb tells Ariadne about his past with Mal and how time dilation really feels in dreams.
I just didn't understand the concept that hours could turn into years down there.
Christopher Nolan will echo this in Interstellar.
But I was prepared. I knew theory. Reality's different.
This is basically Nolan admitting how fast time can slip away when you're working away from your children. Now, when they wake up, Cobb's point of view of Mal's face lying beside him is the same framing of her with her head on the train track. So they died in their dreams and woke up in the same exact pose, which likely contributed to Mal's disorientation over whether or not she was truly awake. We learned that Mal brought Cobb to the hotel suite of 3502, but she's actually in the hotel room across the way. This way, Cobb would have no way of stopping her from jumping. It's interesting that Mal chose suicide by falling, which might have been her trying to correct what she saw as a false suicide by train, because falling would also trigger a kick that would wake her up in another way, if that were the case. They pressure Fisher into saying a random 6-digit number.
528491.
Now this number doesn't mean anything, but the fact that Fisher organically produced it is what gives its power as they reinforce it. The phone number on the napkin, the hotel room numbers, and so that when Fisher punches in this number himself on that safe, he feels like he completed this master puzzle, but that catharsis was completely artificial. Eames tells Arthur,
You mustn't be afraid to dream a little bigger, darling.
yeah, it's some shit talk, but if you think about it, Eames is also inspiring Arthur to use explosives as a way to propel people, which is how Arthur's able to create a kick in zero gravity using Newton's third law. So basically, Eames incepted their own later escape by telling the producer to think outside the box. So we now enter the next dream layer, Arthur's dream, which is a hotel within Yusuf's dream of LA within the reality of the plane. And since these dreams are films, the hotel pays homage to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining and its labyrinthian Overlook Hotel. Cobb and Fisher in the bathroom is an homage to Jack and Grady in the bathroom, and the way Cobb sees ghosts of his children is kind of like how the family sees ghosts around the hotel. Fisher is distracted by this blonde woman, one of Eames' favorite characters, a nod to the woman in the red dress distraction in The Matrix. Cobb runs the Mr. Charles con, alerting Fisher to the fact that he is in a dream, pointing to the sudden rain and the shifting gravity caused by Yusuf's erratic driving above. And it works.
You're not real.
I'm a projection of your subconscious.
Yeah, the moment Fisher accepts Cobb's premise, that bartender projection in the background turns back to his work, and the bar tilts back level, and Cobb, notice, is able to take his foot off the base of Fisher's stool. So even though the hotel may continue to tilt from the turns of the van, Fisher accepts all this tilting as normal and level, because he thinks he knows what his reality is. And I only just now noticed Cobb's word choice when it comes to turning Fisher against Browning.
You and Browning have been pulled into this dream because they're trying to steal something from your mind.
Yeah, Cobb incepted a suspicion of Browning, which is why, right after this, a projection of Browning pops up in the hotel.
How he acts will tell us if Fisher is starting to suspect his motives the way we want him to.
And when this Browning shows up at room 528, it was Fisher's manipulated suspicion that brought him there. Cobb seals this.
They already had him. They were torturing him.
And he saw them torture him.
Yeah, Fisher didn't say that. Cobb put those words in his mouth and led him to the conclusion that he wanted him to reach, which leads us into Eames' Dream, a movie within Arthur's dream, within Yusuf's dream, within reality, and another film homage, in this case, Nolan's favorite 007 movie, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which is famous for its downhill skiing shootouts. Here, Ariadne asks Cobb,
What's down there for you?
By down there, she's setting up an even deeper layer, Limbo, where Cobb buries Maul. Maul, until now on this heist, has only appeared as a train in Los Angeles, the broken glass in the bar, and the curtains in the window, so Maul is due for an encore. Now, Yusuf's rolling van causes the hotel to rotate. Nolan's team constructed a rotating centrifuge in an airplane hangar, sets both for the hallway and the inner hotel room that Arthur and the projection fall into. Nolan and Wally Pfister mounted the camera on a track to the floor so that it would move with the structure, and we would be surprised when Arthur's able to hop onto the wall or onto the ceiling to adapt to the shifting gravity. Joseph Gordon-Levitt did all of his own stunts for this, and it's clear here why he was cast, physically at least. His wiry figure and his long, thin limbs make him look confident and spider-like and all this. Someone who's clearly fought on this kind of landscape before. He charges at the projection while the other guy fumbles for the gun, and notice how Arthur is always one move ahead of him, like a loaded die who always knows where he's gonna land. Then down on the snow level, Cobb tells Fisher,
Keep this live. I'll be listening the whole time.
This sets up Fisher later turning off his radio due to static, which is why he doesn't hear them when they're warning about Maul.
There's someone else in there.
Fisher, it's a trap. Get up.
Maul only knows where they're going because Eames was busy playing James Bond and couldn't tell the others about the shortcut through the vent shaft, so Ariadne had to tell Cobb, and now Cobb knows. This was the game changer because for the earlier two mazes, Cobb didn't know the layout, and thus Maul didn't either. Meanwhile, Arthur delivers on his Penrose Stairs paradox. And I love how Nolan shot this. The projection fires down at Arthur, and Arthur begins to run down that lower flight of stairs. But on that same action, Nolan cuts to this overhead shot where it makes it look like Arthur's continuing to run down, but Nolan cranes the camera to reveal that he actually ran up a flight of stairs. So from the projection's point of view, Arthur ran down a flight beneath the projection, but then appears behind him. Meanwhile, the stairwell that he's looking at pulled some glitch in the Matrix, Hogwarts, castle, shifting stairs, bullshit. And because Arthur is a dreamer, he can make it happen. But after the avalanche, I like how Fisher snaps.
Couldn't someone have dreamt of a goddamn beach?
Cobb does dream up a beach, the shore of his subconscious down in Limbo, and that is way worse than this is. Now the hotel is now in zero gravity, and for this they built a hallway tilted completely upward, suspended Joseph Gordon-Levitt with wires as the camera pointed directly up at him. They also dressed everyone in form-fitting clothes with starched pant legs and shoelaces made from wires, Elliot Page in a tight bun so that the hair wouldn't have to float around. It's all super practical and super effective. But Maul shoots Fisher and he drops down into Limbo along with Saito when he inevitably dies, and Cobb and Ariadne have to drop into the final level, Cobb's Dream, or Limbo. Production designer Guy Hendricks Diaz and VFX supervisor Paul Franklin conceived of this dream city, starting with buildings designed in the 30s Bauhaus architectural style, and notice how block by block they progress in style through the 50s, 60s, all the way to modern skyscrapers and then beyond to future green energy structures that Cobb and Mal would have dreamt into existence. And as they arrive on the coastline, those Bauhaus designs crumble into the ocean, which the creative team described as an architectural glacier, with chunks breaking off like icebergs. And Nolan had some interesting words to describe it.
And the water, for me, the ocean sort of represents the subconscious. It represents the subconscious over time eating away at this vision of theirs and it being gradually lost.
And they find Mal, who says,
"No creeping doubts, chased around the globe by anonymous corporations and police forces."
Now, in screenwriting, this is called hanging a lantern. You have a character call out some of the logical issues with the script, you hang a lantern within the logical murk to signal to the viewer that you are aware it doesn't make sense, but just go with me, like Arthur did this earlier.
So now you've noticed how much time Cobb spends doing things he says never to do.
When this is done well, it at least advances character or advances theme. In these instances, Nolan calls out the oddity of Cobol engineering and Cobb changing the rules halfway through the movie as a way to suggest reality itself can often feel fictitious, and filmmakers often silo their creative partners and move the goalposts to their own peril. Mal says,
"You don't believe in one reality anymore, so choose."
Yes, like the root myth of the Matrix, we can never be certain of our reality, therefore we must determine our own reality. But Inception takes a step further and tells us that reality is when we choose to put our love for others above our dreams. Cobb has to admit that it was he who infected Mal's mind with the idea of your world isn't real. He accomplished true Inception, but he cursed himself with the ghost of his wife, who makes it impossible for him to realize his dream of dream crafting. So back to our question, who does Mal represent? One thing that isn't talked about enough is that Christopher Nolan originally drafted Inception to be a horror film. That's why Mal is often shot with these horror jump scares. And let's not forget when Mal crept behind Fisher like freaking Jason Voorhees. We could see Mal as the archetype of the succubus, a female demonic entity who appears in dreams to basically f you to death. Every artist is seduced by the romance of a dream world that he can escape into, rather than have to deal with the realities of his family where it's not all about him. But in this filmmaking metaphor, where Cobb is the director, Arthur is the producer, Ariane is the screenwriter, Eames the actor, Saito the studio, Yusuf the VFX artist, Fisher the audience, what is Mal? Well, if you've been watching closely, I've already incepted the answer. And in this analysis, I think I finally revealed Mal for what she really is to the filmmaker, the composer. So really, the voice of Mal is behind all of this. A siren song, composing the music, drawing the sailor to shore. As we hear the final notes of the film from the composer, Mal delivers this film's biggest jump scare with just a glance. So Mal is due for an encore. Mal, Marion Cotillard, who was cast in the afterglow of her Oscar win from the role of Edith Piaf. Edith Piaf, whose voice and song Hans Zimmer used to generate the full soundscape of this movie, and the trigger the team uses to edit the final cut of their masterpiece together. Mal is the composer. Hans Zimmer was Christopher Nolan's most valuable creative partner in this era of his filmmaking. And like Cobb does with Mal, Nolan would often silo Zimmer with incomplete details about his movie's secretive plots so that Zimmer would produce more heartfelt, intimate music with more of a universal emotional effect. Now, I'm not saying Nolan had a toxic romance with Zimmer or anything. I mean, not that I know of, but music composition represents to Nolan the one aspect of filmmaking that he can't really do himself. And there is a sort of romantic elusiveness to that I think Nolan embodied in the character of Mal. So Mal is really the itch in every artist's work that can never fully be scratched and sucks you into a dream of perfection while your real life with your family passes you by. But reality is when we choose to put our love for others over our dreams. And so while the inception they pull off on Fisher is artificially constructed, the catharsis he feels is real nonetheless, as is often the case when we watch movies and they can make us love our family more. It's not like Steven Spielberg or Christopher Nolan know what our relationships are with our parents or our kids, but they're able to put these artificial storylines in front of us and we still feel something real by watching them. Actually, this may be the only heist film I know of where the thieves leave the mark better off. Ian leads Fisher to reframe his father's word of disappointed into, "I was disappointed that you tried to be like me." And Fisher walks away from this believing that his father kept his beloved homemade pinwheel, or might have and just never talked to him about that. Freed from Mal, Cobb finds Saito in limbo, and I just realized this, but what really saves them is the fact that Cobb had pulled a past heist this job on Saito using this exact architecture. Limbo is unconstructed dream space made up of past dream fragments of the subconscious of the dreamer who had been there before. This house had been floating around Cobb's subconscious from his audition job for Saito, and that's why Saito knew to wait for him there, and that's how Cobb found his way back to it. And by opening the film with this moment, Nolan set himself up to come back to it 2 hours later so that, for us, it feels like a half-remembered dream. But earlier he edited with a disorienting jump cut into the opening dream heist. Now he edits from old Saito grabbing the gun to Cobb waking up on the plane. Cobb looks at Arthur and Ariadne and Saito, all of them sharing a look of familiarity, like Dorothy with her loved ones at the end of The Wizard of Oz. And my running theory that all American movies are trying to be Citizen Kane or The Wizard of Oz, duh. The dream movie that ends with an implicit "there's no place like home," and the question over whether it was all a dream or not is totally Wizard of Oz. In fact, every movie in this reality month is gonna be that. I love the subtle glance Fisher gives Cobb as they pass, like Dorothy feeling an odd deja vu upon seeing a familiar face. When that customs agent waved Cobb through, it doesn't totally make sense that Saito with just a phone call could get the authorities to drop murder charges, and it's plausible that Cobb may have just been avoiding his kids out of guilt. But again, it does not matter whether the final scene is real. While his son James says he wants to show Cobb his house on a cliff, Cobb is also not wearing his wedding ring. The top does wobble, Michael Caine is present, and unlike in all the dreams of this movie, we actually saw Cobb arrive there with Miles from a second location. The point is that after every other time Cobb saw his kids, he'd turn away before he was able to see their faces. Now Cobb chooses to continue looking at them until he can see their smiles. He chooses them. So sure, the top may go on spinning without him, but he does not care to even look to see if it topples over or not. I think this is Christopher Nolan's way of saying our dreams do not need us as much as our families do. That dream will continue spinning on and on without us, so we don't have to continue staring at it. Reality is when we choose to put our love for others above our dreams. And yes, we're in reality month here on The Deep Dive with an analysis of The Matrix and a real creepy video where I clone myself with AI. I'm gonna end the month by analyzing Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse ahead of Across the Spider-Verse. And the best way to support The Deep Dive is by grabbing our Multiverse Dive Miles Morales shirt at nerdriot.shop. So subscribe, turn notifications on, and share this channel and its videos with everyone you know. Follow me at EA Voss. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, my divers of the deep. And oh my god, I'm wearing my wedding ring. Am I still in the dream? I don't care. I'm gonna go kiss my wife.